So this all started about a year ago. I'm going to try and remember all the details as well as I can, and I promise I'm not exaggerating on any of this. So I live in a small town somewhat connected to two other smaller towns. I was in my last year of high school and I had a friend who graduated a year prior. She moved into one of the neighboring towns and found a small mobile home that was in her budget. It was just a humble little 2-bedroom trailer, but it served as a good hosting place for small parties, drinking, and all the like. So after her first week of living there, we met for coffee and I asked her how she liked it. She proceeded to tell me that the first night she was laying down about to fall asleep when her bed started vibrating. She thought it might have just been the plumbing, so they tried to fall asleep. The vibrating grew stronger until it was literally shaking her bed. She was so tired at that point that she chose just to lay there until it stopped, which it eventually did. She told me she had spent the next nights sleeping on her couch as she felt a strong sense that she was unwelcome in that bedroom. She was even woken up periodically to the couch shaking. About a month later, a couple friends and I were spending the night there, but we chose to abstain from alcohol on this particular occasion. The entire day went fine and it eventually grew dark outside. At about 1 o'clock in the morning, our two other friends moved into the guest bedroom. The friend who lives there, I'll call her Jessica, would be sleeping on the couch with me. It was a large couch that wrapped around a corner of the room. We sat there for about 20 minutes longer just watching TV. I was especially vigilant in sensing a shaking, which never occurred. But as soon as we turned out the lights and laid down to go to sleep, sure enough the couch began to vibrate. My friend laughed as she sensed my excitement. It grew into a vigorous shake as she had told in her past stories. Then it stopped. We heard the bed in her bedroom rocking back and forth, but it was just the bed. We did not hear any of the other furniture in the house moving as if it was a vent issue. Then the rocking stopped and a minute later the cabinet next to my head began to rattle. All these incidents were isolated, as none of them overlapped, and there was a couple seconds interval between the object's movement. The couch then gave a loud thud as we felt it lurch forward and slam on the ground. Then all was quiet. The next morning we tried to explain to the others what had happened. I'm not sure if they believed us, but I didn't care because I was still not quite sure what had occurred. As the weeks passed, Jessica told us stories of coming home and finding a black cat sitting in her living room, as well as having her sisters, who are even bigger spiritualists than she was, telling her that the side of the house where her bedroom was located was filled with very strong negative energy. She also heard footsteps in her hallway and had to turn off her motion sensor light in there because it kept turning on at night. She moved out about a month later, and a part of me wishes we had investigated further, as I'm very big on ghosts, but have not encountered very many in my life. So what do you guys think? I honestly don't know if I just let my imagination get the better of me, or if this story actually has any merit, let alone if anybody else found it spooky. This happened when I was 10. We had just moved into a new house around the 25th of October. My memory isn't great of this event. I'm 20 now, so yeah. So back to the story. I had just moved in with my family. We were getting our stuff out of our U-Haul and getting the house set up. My mom set her phone on the table and was looking under in the table cabinet, putting stuff in it. And her phone flew off the table and hit the wall. It didn't break, but it was almost like it was thrown. The second day of being there, we all had to sleep on the floor with just blankets cause we didn't have mattresses cause we were gonna get new ones that day, but didn't get to it. But when we got up, I went to the kitchen to see if my parents got any food in it yet, but when I got in the kitchen, the cabinets and the fridge was open. I asked my mom why the cabinets and fridge were open, but my mom said she did it, but she had a surprised look on her face when she saw it though. So I didn't really believe her when she said she did it. After that we started getting the rest of our stuff in the house. Once we finished, we went to the store to get some stuff other than cereal, which was the only food item we had. Before I say the rest, I need to tell you something about my room. I had a shelf of Xbox 360 games. When we got home from shopping, I went in my room to play Xbox, but when I got in, all my games were knocked off the shelf. I didn't know why, but I was a kid, so I didn't really care. I just picked them up and put them back. That night I had a nightmare of my parents and my home on fire, and my parents were like melting, if that makes sense. Then all of a sudden a kid that had burn marks and just looked gross, and from what I remember it said, "Will you be my friend please?" Now I was already freaking out, but in the next few days I had weird thoughts. Like not my own thoughts, like something was telling me to do bad things like kill my parents and jump off the roof, no one will know, or kill my parents. I told my mom and she sent me with my grandma and she hired someone to come and cleanse the house, and it stopped after that. Or most of it. Every once in a while something would happen, but nothing like we were experiencing. We moved again like 1.5 years after that. It's not the scariest story, but it's what I got, so yeah. There have been many supernatural events in my life. It wasn't until recently, after buying a house with my husband, that I began to think back and recall those stories. I know how much this sub hates backstories, but there definitely is some backstory that needs to be shared. To begin with, it has always seemed like I have been a magnet for ghostly encounters, myself and my 2 older sisters, that is. I adapted to these events because unlike they were towards my sisters, they never made any physical contact with me. There are many stories from my childhood. It's hard to say if it is the same entity that has been around my whole life. Let's jump back to the present. My husband and I just bought our very first house. This house is quite unique in the sense that it is in the heart of our community and was built sometime in the late 1800s. It is hard to say exactly when. It has hardly been updated until now, so as you can imagine it already had an eerie feel to it. My husband is a skeptic, so he basically looks at me like I'm crazy whenever I say anything. To give you a visual, my home has 2 floors, and an undeveloped basement. The basement has a 6-foot ceiling, and a cold storage cellar with a crawl space all around the top. I will note that all doors in the basement and leading to the basement lock from the outside. The main floor has 2 sets of stairs. The first set of stairs begins as soon as you walk into the saloon-style doors in the entrance, and on the first landing there is what I describe as a Juliet window that fully opens, and you can see the living room through. From the 2nd floor main hallway you can see down the stairs, and into the living room. My husband is a workaholic, so I'm often home alone. This is the only time it bothered me, as new homes are always a little sketchy when you first move in. During the first sightings the shadows moved quickly. I would notice them out of the corner of my eye, passing an open door, or exiting rooms shortly after I entered. I would just shrug it off, because I thought it was one of my 3 cats. We all know how cats are. It slowly progressed from there. Instead of shadows zooming through my home, I started seeing shadows standing in doorways, windows, and in the middle of rooms. The lights in the carriage house in my backyard would turn on and off at random hours of the day. My cats quickly caught on. They began staring at the same areas that I would see shadows. They also began to avoid certain areas of the house, the basement, carriage house, and attic being the main points of illusion. All of these events occurred on the same day. I don't often go to the basement because it is cramped and dusty, which stirs my allergies. The only way to turn on the water valves outside is through the basement, so unfortunately I had to swallow my allergies and go into that dungeon. I had mentioned before that there is a cold cellar. It is positioned right beside the valve controls. The door to the cellar has a gap between the top of the door and frame, and flip latch lock, which is always secured. While down there I had the eerie feeling of being watched. Naturally I wanted to be in and out as quickly as possible. At the exact same time as the pipes started rattling, the cold cellar door swung open with such force. I had thought the pipes created a strong wind, and broke the latch somehow. Upon investigating the door I noticed that the latch was not harmed at all. Needless to say I ran out of there. Later on in the day I was cleaning the office on the 2nd floor. I noticed all 3 of my cats sitting at the top of the stairs staring at the window that overlooks the living room. In an instant 2 of my cats zoomed away and the one remaining started growling, spitting and puffing up. I walked over to comfort him and I saw a shadowy figure that looked like a man standing on the other side of the window. It looked as if its head was pointing up the stairs in my general direction. Suddenly, in the time it took me to blink, the shadow was gone. That night, throughout the whole night, it sounded as if someone was walking around in my attic. Anytime I went into the attic the footsteps would stop, but the moment I would go back to my bedroom they would start up again. People keep telling me the sounds I heard were just mice, or bats in the attic. But I can assure you, there is nothing more recognizable than a slow, steady pace in the middle of the night. Every now and then I see the shadow figure, but at this point I'm used to it, and my cat's behaviors. Nothing bad has happened, so I have just been ignoring it. If you have made it this far, please give any suggestions as to that you think I should do. I believe this is the same shadow that has been around for as long as I can remember.